Let's talk about historical baking antecedents. When most people think of historical baking, they think of something like this. Great-grandma at the stove doing some kind of cooking. Now, this is a little far ahead of the period we're actually working in. What you'll notice is that in this case, the woman is standing at a cast iron stove. However, behind her are the doors to the open fireplace. She's probably in a summer kitchen, and the doors to the fireplace probably haven't been opened for decades. She's actually standing in front of a much earlier kind of cooking, and it's from that period. We're talking basically pre-1850s, which is the period that we're discussing and using to recreate for our own bake day. It's difficult to find historical pictures in our area of the process of baking. It was one of those everyday things that was overlooked in the process of documenting life in our area. However, this is the only photograph we've found. It shows actually the mother of an elderly friend of ours and her sister sitting outside at a drop leaf table. Standing between them is the hired girl, and they're working at probably making some kind of pies. There's a rolling pin, there is a flour board, there are a couple of crots, and some tin baking pans. My own sourdough baking antecedents go back to my great-grandfather Andrews and his wife and his daughter Laura. They lived on a ranch in the Texas plains that they settled in the late 1800s. They had hired help, the cowboys, who worked at the ranch, and my great-grandmother was the one who baked the pancakes and the flapjacks that fed the cowboys every morning, and she used a sourdough starter. There is a famous story in my family about the day the new hired hand came for his first breakfast. Great-grandmother had prepared a huge mound of flapjacks for the crew to come in and eat. She laid them down on the table, and the hired hand pulled the entire platter of pancakes over to him and started to eat them. We're not quite sure how that ended, but I'm sure he was well informed that they had to be shared. Long after my family sold the ranch and moved into town, my grandmother Laura kept a batch of sourdough starter in her refrigerator for decades. She used them every morning for her sourdough pancakes, the smell of which filled the house. And whenever we went to visit, the great joy I had was not only smelling the pancakes, but eating them. And watching her, at the end of breakfast, rejuvenating the starter, putting in a little more flour, a little more water, a little more sugar into the starter, stirring it up, and putting the bowl back into the refrigerator. This lasted until my grandmother was in her 80s. And then, as she became senile, the starter was thrown out with a lot of other things in my family. So we lost a decades-old sourdough starter. Here is the earliest picture of me as a baker, 3rd grade. I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. Woodcock Elementary School in Mobile, Alabama. I was a doll. Mother made the baker's outfit. I had the wooden bowl, wooden spoon, and I'm not sure what I did, but I'm sure there was singing and dancing involved. Now let's flash forward about 30 years. Same baker, older, not necessarily wiser. This is 1995. I was demonstrating outdoor baking at the Mercer Museum Folk Festival in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. The man seated and pointing out a line in the Bible is my cameraman, Christian Zinzendorf. He was demonstrating the flax to linen process. My baker's cap is an 18th century French baker's cap. I still demonstrate baking today at a few sites, mainly the Schuylkill County Fair, which is held every August here in the county. We built the bake oven that is now shown on YouTube as the 4-day bake oven. Here she is, Edna Eby Heller, standing at the stove with the deep fat frying pan, making snavely sticks in her fryer. Edna Eby Heller was actually quite a scholar and researcher of Pennsylvania Dutch cooking, beginning in the early 1950s. She went throughout southeastern and central Pennsylvania, researching recipes, talking to home cooks and bakers, and putting her information into a long series of articles for Pennsylvania Folklife magazine. She was also involved with the Pennsylvania Dutch Folk Festival for many years in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, and she wrote a series of cookbooks. I have 2, and they are my Bibles for Pennsylvania Dutch cooking. They're small, they're paperback, they're cheap, and they're still in print. You can tell from my copy of the cookbook, well, the cover is gone, or separated. I use these a lot, and she has them divided up, as so many cookbooks are, into appetizers, main courses, vegetables, desserts, lots and lots and lots of desserts. I'm going to be using her Black Joe recipe for our bake day. She also has Volume 2, by popular demand, even more recipes. And she not only gives you the recipes, but when they come from a specific person, she credits that person and the town where they're from. So you know you're getting a very authentic recipe. She doesn't water things down. If it calls for lard, you use lard. So this is the type of traditional Pennsylvania Dutch cooking that we're going to be doing during this series of videos.